Kate Murphy sat in the cold metal chair and looked across the long table at 12 of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. The Zephyrians were tall as basketball players, but thin like praying mantises. Their 4 arms moved constantly, and their big black eyes never blinked. Each one carried weapons that could turn a human into ash in half a second. They had come to Harmony Point Station to talk about taking human colonies away from Earth. Kate was here to stop them. The meeting. Room smelled like cleaning chemicals and recycled air. Big windows showed the stars outside, spinning slowly as the station turned. Kate had been in rooms like this many times before. She was good at her job. People called her a diplomat, but she knew the truth. Her real job was to sit across from aliens who wanted to hurt humans and make them change their minds with words instead of weapons. Kate reached for the tea service she had brought from Earth. The white ceramic pot was warm in her hands. She had made Earl Grey tea because it reminded her of home. Not Earth home, but Titan Base home where she grew up. On Titan Base, you drank hot tea while ice storms tried to kill you outside. The steam from her cup rose up in thin lines that disappeared into the air conditioning system. War Commander Thicksnoll was the leader of the Zephyrian group. His mandibles clicked when he talked, and his voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. He had been talking for 20 minutes about how humans were weak and how Zephyrians deserved the colonies more. Kate had heard this speech before from other species. They all thought humans were soft because humans preferred talking to fighting. The Zephyrians did not understand humans at all. They saw Kate sitting there in her neat blue diplomatic uniform and thought she was helpless. They saw her small hands and her lack of weapons and decided she was prey. This was their first mistake. Kate had grown up on Titan Base where the weather could kill you, and the local animals definitely would try. She had reflexes that came from dodging ice falling from the sky and running from creatures with too many teeth. Kate poured tea into her cup with steady hands. The liquid was dark brown and smelled like bergamot. She had learned to make perfect tea from her grandmother, who had lived through the early days of Titan Base when humans were still figuring out how to survive there. Her grandmother could make tea during meteor showers and never spill a drop. Kate had inherited that skill along with many others. The Zephyrians watched her pour tea and their mandibles clicked faster. In their culture, showing such calm during serious talks was an insult. They thought Kate was being rude by not showing proper fear. War Commander Thicksnoll's 4 hands moved closer to his weapons. His warriors saw the signal and began to shift in their chairs. Kate lifted the teacup to her lips. The ceramic was thin and delicate, but stronger than it looked. Like many things from Earth, it had been designed to survive in places where breaking meant dying. She could feel the heat through the cup and smell the familiar scent that reminded her of quiet mornings on Titan Base when the storms had passed and the world was still and beautiful. The tea tasted perfect. Kate had been making this same blend for 15 years, and she knew exactly how long to let it steep. On Titan Base, good tea was one of the few luxuries they had. Everything else was about survival, but tea was about staying human in a place that wanted to kill you. Kate had drunk tea while watching ice volcanoes erupt and while listening to the howls of creatures that hunted in the eternal twilight. War Commander Thicksnoll spoke again. His words were about human weakness and Zephyrian strength. He talked about how his species had evolved to be perfect killers, while humans had evolved to be nothing special. Kate listened, while she held her teacup steady. She had heard these words from other species who thought they understood Earth and its colonies. They never did. The truth was that humans had not evolved to be killers. They had evolved to be survivors. There was a big difference. Killers were good at one thing, but survivors were good at everything. Humans could eat almost anything and live, almost anywhere, and learn almost any skill. Most importantly, humans could think their way out of problems that would kill other species. Kate set her teacup down on the saucer without making a sound. The Zephyrians were still talking, but their body language had changed. She could see the tension in their four shoulders and the way their hands kept moving toward their weapons. They were getting ready to stop talking and start killing. This happened sometimes in diplomatic meetings when one side decided that words were not enough. The room had good acoustics because it was designed for many different species to communicate clearly. Kate could hear the tiny sounds that the Zephyrians made when they were preparing for violence. Their breathing changed and their mandibles stopped clicking. On Titan Base, you learned to listen for sounds like these, because they meant something, was about to try to eat you. Kate picked up her teacup again and took another small sip. The tea was still the perfect temperature. She had timed this meeting well. Earl Grey was best when it was hot but not scalding. Too hot and you could not taste the bergamot. Too cool and it lost the complexity that made it special. Kate had learned to appreciate these small things during her childhood when small pleasures were rare and precious. War Commander Thixnall stopped talking. He looked at his warriors and made a gesture with his upper left hand. Kate recognized the signal because she had studied Zephyrian combat tactics. It meant attack now and take no prisoners. The 12 aliens began to reach for their plasma disruptors at the same time. They moved fast, like the predators they had evolved to be. Kate took one more sip of her tea and prepared to show them what a human from a Deathworld could do when pushed too far. Kate moved before the Zephyrians had their weapons halfway out of their holsters. Her right hand grabbed the heavy ceramic teapot, while her left kept the teacup perfectly level. She threw the teapot with the same motion she had used as a child, to knock ice birds out of the air before they could steal her food. The teapot hit the nearest Zephyrian's weapon and sent it spinning across the room to crash into the wall. The other 11 Zephyrians were fast, but Kate was faster. She had grown up on Titan Base where being slow meant being dead. Every morning on Titan started with dodging falling ice while you ran to the food hall. Every evening ended with checking for predators before you went to sleep. Kate had been training for this moment her entire life without knowing it. She slid under the conference table as plasma bolts burned the air where she had been sitting. The table was made of reinforced metal that could stop most energy weapons. Kate rolled across the floor and came up on the other side, still holding her teacup. The tea inside had not even rippled. Her grandmother would have been proud. 2 Zephyrians charged around the table with their mandibles clicking in rage. Kate kicked one of the heavy chairs directly into their path. On Titan Base, she had learned to use everything as a weapon because real weapons were too expensive to waste. The chair caught both aliens in their long legs and sent them tumbling into each other in a tangle of arms and angry chittering. Kate reached down and plucked the weapons from their hands while they were still trying to figure out which arms belonged to which body. She threw both plasma disruptors toward the far wall where they clattered harmlessly into a corner. The Zephyrians looked up at her with their big black eyes full of confusion and growing fear. 3 more aliens tried to surround her from different directions. Kate had expected this because pack tactics were always the same whether the pack was made of ice wolves on Titan or insect warriors in space. She grabbed the decorative plant from the corner table and threw it at the closest Zephyrian. The pot was heavy ceramic, and the plant inside had thick, woody stems. It hit the alien in his center mass and knocked his weapon out of all four hands at once. The second Zephyrian fired his plasma disruptor, but Kate was already moving. She had learned to dodge energy weapons during the border wars when pirates tried to raid Titan Base. The key was to never be where the enemy expected you to be. Kate spun to her left and grabbed a data pad from the table. She threw it like a frisbee and watched it knock the weapon out of the alien's grip with a satisfying crack. The third Zephyrian tried to grab her with his four arms, but Kate ducked under his reach and swept his legs with her own. This was a move she had learned from wrestling ice bears in the Titan wilderness. The alien went down hard, and his weapon skittered away across the floor. Kate stepped on it as she moved past and crushed the delicate electronics inside. War Commander Thixnal was shouting orders in his own language, but his warriors were too confused to follow them. They had trained their entire lives to fight enemies, who fought back in predictable ways. Kate was not fighting like any enemy they had ever faced. She was fighting like someone who had learned combat from pure necessity rather than formal training. Kate took another sip of her tea while she dodged a plasma bolt that left a black mark on the wall behind her. The tea was still perfectly warm and tasted exactly right. She had not spilled a single drop despite rolling under tables and throwing furniture. This was another skill from Titan Base where spilling your drink meant you might not get another one until tomorrow. Two more Zephyrians tried to corner her near the big windows that showed the stars outside. Kate used their own size against them, by staying close to the ground where their long arms could not reach effectively. She grabbed one alien's ankle and pulled hard while pushing against his knee with her free hand. The joint bent in a direction it was not supposed to go, and the Zephyrian fell with a loud crash. His weapon flew out of his grip, and Kate caught it in midair. She immediately threw it at the other Zephyrian who was trying to aim at her. The heavy plasma disruptor hit him in the mandibles, and he staggered backward, clutching his face. His own weapon dropped to the floor, and Kate kicked it away under the table. Kate straightened her diplomatic uniform and smoothed down her hair. She had learned to stay neat during combat because appearing calm and controlled made enemies more afraid than any amount of shouting or threatening. On Titan Base, the most dangerous predators were the quiet ones who never showed how dangerous they were until it was too late. 4 Zephyrians were still armed, but they were backing away from her toward the door. They had stopped making their attack sounds and started making the high-pitched noises that meant fear in their species. Kate had studied alien psychology as part of her diplomatic training. She knew that the Zephyrians were beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. War Commander Thixnal pointed all 4 of his hands at Kate and shouted something that was probably an insult in his language. Kate did not speak Zephyrian, but she understood the universal language of violence. He was trying to rally his warriors for one final attack. This was exactly what she had expected him to do. Kate finished her tea and set the empty cup down on its saucer with a gentle clink. She had drunk the entire serving during the fight without spilling any or letting it get cold. This was a skill that had no practical purpose except to show that she was completely in control of the situation. Sometimes the most important message you could send was that you were not even trying hard. The remaining Zephyrians looked at their empty-handed comrades who were sitting on the floor, holding various bruised body parts. They looked at their weapons, scattered around the room. They looked at Kate standing calmly beside the table, still wearing her neat blue uniform. Most importantly, they looked at the empty teacup that proved she had been relaxed enough to finish her drink while fighting all of them. War Commander Thixnal made one final gesture, and the 4 remaining warriors raised their weapons toward Kate. She picked up the sugar bowl from the tea service and prepared to show them that the fight was not over yet. The sugar bowl was small and round and made of the same white ceramic as the rest of Kate's tea service. She had brought the entire set from Earth because familiar things helped her stay calm during stressful negotiations. The bowl was heavy, enough to hurt someone if thrown correctly, and Kate had learned to throw things correctly during her childhood on Titan Base, where accuracy meant the difference between eating dinner and going hungry. Kate threw the sugar bowl in a perfect arc that caught the nearest Zephyrian's weapon right at the trigger mechanism. The impact knocked the plasma disruptor sideways just as the alien pulled the trigger. The energy bolt went wide and burned a hole in the ceiling instead of hitting Kate. The sugar bowl shattered against the wall, but it had done its job. The three remaining armed Zephyrians spread out to try to get clear shots at her, but Kate was already moving again. She had learned from the ice storms on Titan that staying in one place too long was always a mistake. Movement was life, and stillness was death. She grabbed the cream pitcher from the tea service and threw it at the second Zephyrian with the same smooth motion her grandmother had used to drive off scavenging birds. The cream pitcher was smaller than the sugar bowl, but it was solid ceramic, and Kate's aim was perfect. It hit the alien's upper right hand just as he was steadying his weapon for a shot. His fingers opened involuntarily, and the plasma disruptor fell to the floor with a metallic clang. Kate was beside him before he could reach for it with one of his other hands. She used a pressure point technique she had learned from subduing ice bears during the winter hunts. Ice bears were twice the size of Zephyrians and 3 times as aggressive, but they had the same basic nerve clusters that most vertebrate species shared. Kate pressed her thumb into the spot just below the alien's shoulder joint and watched him crumple to his knees as his entire arm went numb. The Zephyrian tried to grab her with his other 3 arms, but Kate was already rolling away across the floor. She came up next to the table and grabbed the small plate that had held cookies for the meeting. The cookies were scattered now, but the plate was intact and made of the same durable ceramic as everything else in her tea service. Kate spun the plate like a discus toward the third armed Zephyrian. The alien tried to duck, but the plate curved in the air and caught his weapon from below. The plasma disruptor flew out of his hands and crashed into the big window that showed the stars outside. The window was made of transparent aluminum and did not break, but the weapon shattered into pieces that would never fire again. War Commander Thicksnall was the only one left with a working weapon. He held it in all 4 hands to keep it steady, and aimed directly at Kate's chest. His mandibles were clicking rapidly, which meant he was either very angry or very scared, or both. Kate had seen this combination before in predators who realized they had picked the wrong prey. Kate looked around the room at the 8 Zephyrians who were no longer armed. Some were sitting on the floor holding injured body parts. Others were standing against the walls looking confused and frightened. All of them were staring at her like she was some kind of monster instead of just a diplomat who had grown up in a place where monsters were real. The truth was that Kate felt sorry for them. They had come here expecting to intimidate a weak human, female, into giving them what they wanted. Instead, they had discovered that humans were not weak at all. They were just civilized enough to hide their strength until it was needed. This was a lesson that other species learned the hard way when they pushed humans too far. Kate walked slowly toward War Commander Thicksnall with her hands empty and visible. She was not showing any signs of fear or aggression. On Titan Base, she had learned to approach dangerous animals this way when fighting was not the best option. Sometimes showing that you were not afraid was enough to make the dangerous animal reconsider its choices. The war commander kept his weapon pointed at her, but his hands were shaking slightly. Kate could see the confusion in his big black eyes. He had probably never encountered a human before today. His species had built their reputation on being the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. Now he was facing a single human female who had just disarmed 8 of his best fighters without breaking a sweat. Kate stopped walking when she was close enough to smell the alien's strange scent that reminded her of metal and old leaves. She could see the details of his weapon and knew that it was charged and ready to fire. One squeeze of the trigger would turn her into ash. But Kate also knew that War Commander Thixnall was not going to pull that trigger because he was beginning to understand something important. The War Commander had realized that Kate could have killed all of his warriors if she had wanted to. She had been holding back the entire time. Every throw had been calculated to disarm rather than seriously injure. Every move had been designed to neutralize threats without causing permanent damage. This was not how warriors fought when they were trying to win. This was how teachers fought when they were trying to make a point. Kate reached into her jacket pocket slowly and carefully. War Commander Thixnall tensed, and his finger moved closer to the trigger, but he did not fire. Kate pulled out a small white handkerchief that she used to clean her glasses. She held it up so he could see that it was just cloth and not a weapon. Then Kate threw the handkerchief at the War Commander's plasma disruptor. The cloth was light and soft and should not have been able to affect a heavy metal weapon in any way. But Kate had learned on Titan Base that sometimes the smallest things could have the biggest effects if you understood physics and timing and how to use them together. The handkerchief wrapped around the barrel of the plasma disruptor just as War Commander Thixnall pulled the trigger in surprise. The cloth blocked the energy discharge for just long enough to cause a feedback loop in the weapon's power system. The disruptor sparked and smoked and then went dead in his hands. War Commander Thixnall looked down at his useless weapon and then back up at Kate. All 12 of his warriors were now disarmed and defeated. The small human female who had done this to them was standing calmly in front of him, wearing the same neat diplomatic uniform she had started with. She did not look tired or angry or afraid. She looked like someone who had just finished a routine task that required no special effort. Kate walked back to the table and sat down in her chair. She picked up her empty teacup and looked at it thoughtfully. The fight was over, but the real negotiation was about to begin. Kate looked at her empty teacup and then at the broken teapot pieces scattered across the floor. She had brought her favorite tea service all the way from Earth, and now half of it was destroyed. This was the cost of diplomacy sometimes. You had to be willing to sacrifice the things you loved to protect the things you valued more. Kate valued human lives more than ceramic dishes. War Commander Thixnall was still holding his dead weapon in all 4 hands. His mandibles had stopped clicking, and he was making a low humming sound that meant deep thought in his species. Kate had studied Zephyrian body language as part of her preparation for this meeting. She knew that the war commander was processing new information that did not fit with his previous understanding of reality. The other 11 Zephyrians were looking around the room at their scattered weapons and broken equipment. None of them were seriously injured, but all of them had learned something important about human capabilities. Kate could see the change in their posture and the way they held themselves. They were no longer predators evaluating prey. They were prey trying to figure out how they had become prey. Kate stood up slowly and walked to the corner where she kept a backup tea service for emergencies like this one. Diplomatic meetings often involved spilled drinks and broken dishes. Kate had learned to always bring extra supplies because running out of tea in the middle of a negotiation was unprofessional. She filled the electric kettle with water and plugged it into the wall. War Commander Thicksnall watched her prepare new tea with the same fascination that a mouse might watch a cat that had decided not to eat it. He was beginning to understand that everything he thought he knew about humans had been wrong. Kate could see the questions forming in his alien mind. If this small female could defeat 12 Zephyrian warriors without trying hard, then what could human soldiers do when they were actually trying to win? The kettle began to heat up, and Kate measured loose tea leaves into a fresh pot. She had brought 3 different types of tea to this meeting, but Earl Grey was still her favorite. The familiar ritual of making tea helped her think clearly about what needed to happen next. The fighting was over, but the real work was just beginning. Kate could hear the other Zephyrians whispering to each other in their own language. She understood enough of their words to know they were discussing what they had just witnessed. Some of them thought she was a specially trained human soldier disguised as a diplomat. Others thought she might be using some kind of advanced technology that made her faster and stronger than normal humans. The truth was simpler and more frightening than either of those explanations. Kate was just a normal human who had grown up in an abnormal place. Titan Base was classified as a hostile environment where only the strongest and smartest humans could survive. Every child who grew up there developed reflexes and skills that seemed impossible to people from safer worlds. The kettle finished heating, and Kate poured the hot water over the tea leaves. The familiar smell of bergamot filled the air and reminded her of quiet mornings on Titan when the storms had passed, and the world was beautiful in its own dangerous way. She had learned to appreciate beauty in harsh places because that was where you found it most often. War Commander Thicksnall finally spoke. His voice was quieter than before and less certain. He asked the question that Kate had been expecting since the fight began. He wanted to know what kind of creature she was, and where she had learned to fight like that. This was the opening Kate had been waiting for. Kate poured tea into a fresh cup and took a careful sip. The temperature was perfect, and the flavor was exactly right. She had been making this same blend for 15 years, and it still brought her comfort in stressful situations. She looked at War Commander Thicksnall over the rim of her cup and saw that he was genuinely curious, rather than angry now. Kate told him the truth. She explained that she was just a regular human diplomat who had grown up on one of humanity's frontier colonies. She described Titan Base as a place where children learned to dodge falling ice before they learned to walk properly. She talked about ice storms that could freeze a person solid in minutes and predators that hunted in packs during the long winters. The Zephyrians listened with growing amazement as Kate described her childhood. They had thought that Earth was a soft world that produced soft people. They had not known about the human colonies on planets that were too dangerous for most other species to visit. They were beginning to understand that humans did not just live on Earth anymore. Kate explained that there were hundreds of human colonies scattered across the galaxy. Some were on desert worlds where the temperature could kill you. Others were on ice worlds where the cold could stop your heart. A few were on jungle worlds where every plant and animal was trying to eat you. Humans lived in all of these places and thrived in them. War Commander Thicksnall asked how many humans lived on these dangerous worlds. Kate told him that there were over 50 million humans living on planets that other species considered uninhabitable. Each one of those humans had learned to survive in conditions that would kill a Zephyrian warrior in hours. Each one of them had reflexes and skills that came from growing up in places where being slow or weak meant being dead. The war commander was quiet for a long time while he processed this information. Kate could see him doing the math in his head. If there were 50 million humans like Kate scattered across the galaxy, then the Zephyrian Empire had made a serious mistake in threatening humanity. They had thought they were picking on a weak species, but they had actually challenged one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Kate finished her tea and set the cup down gently on its saucer. She looked around the room at the 12 Zephyrian warriors who had come here to threaten human colonies. They looked smaller now than they had when the meeting started. Not physically smaller, but smaller in spirit. They had learned that they were not the apex predators they thought they were. Kate told War Commander Thicksnull that humans preferred peace to war because humans understood the true cost of violence. When you grew up in places where everything was trying to kill you, then you learned to value life more highly than those who had never faced real danger. Humans chose diplomacy not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to choose. The war commander asked what would happen if his species continued to threaten human colonies. Kate smiled and took another sip of her tea before answering. She told him that humans were very good at solving problems, and that Zephyrian aggression would definitely be treated as a problem that needed solving. She suggested that finding a peaceful solution would be much better for everyone involved. War Commander Thicksnull looked at his defeated warriors and his broken weapons and nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand that threatening humans had been a mistake that could destroy his entire species if he did not fix it quickly. Kate poured herself a second cup of tea and offered to make some for the Zephyrians as well. War Commander Thicksnull looked surprised by the offer. In his culture, enemies did not share food or drink with each other. But Kate was not treating him like an enemy anymore. She was treating him like someone who had made a mistake and was ready to learn from it. The war commander accepted the offer, and Kate prepared tea for all 12 of the Zephyrians using her backup cups and saucers. She had learned on Titan Base that sharing food was one of the fastest ways to turn enemies into allies. When everyone was hungry and cold, then species differences mattered less than basic survival. Kate believed that the same principle worked in diplomatic situations. While the tea was steeping, Kate explained more about human expansion into dangerous parts of the galaxy. She told the Zephyrians about the mining colonies on volcanic worlds, where humans worked in conditions that would melt most other species. She described the research stations on gas giant moons, where scientists studied phenomena that could kill them if they made one small mistake. The Zephyrians listened with growing respect as Kate painted a picture of human civilization that was completely different from what they had imagined. They had thought humans were weak because humans avoided unnecessary conflicts. Now they understood that humans avoided conflicts because humans knew exactly how destructive they could be when they stopped holding back. Kate served tea to each of the Zephyrians and watched them taste it carefully. Earl Grey was probably very different from whatever they normally drank, but they seemed to appreciate the gesture. Food and drink were universal languages that worked across species barriers. Even predators could recognize when someone was offering friendship instead of fear. War Commander Thicksnull asked about human military capabilities. He wanted to know how many human soldiers there were and what kind of weapons they used. Kate smiled and told him that humans preferred not to discuss military secrets, but she could share some general information that was already public knowledge. Kate explained that human military doctrine was based on the same survival principles that governed life on the frontier colonies. Human soldiers were trained to adapt to any environment and use whatever resources were available. They did not rely on superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They relied on being smarter and more flexible than their enemies. The war commander asked if all human soldiers were as dangerous as Kate. Kate laughed and told him that she was not a soldier at all. She was just a diplomat who had grown up on a frontier world. Real human soldiers were much more dangerous than she was because they had been trained specifically for combat instead of just learning survival skills as children. This information clearly disturbed the Zephyrians, who were already struggling. To accept that a civilian human could defeat their best warriors so easily. Kate could see them trying to imagine what actual human soldiers might be capable of. She decided to help them understand by sharing a story from the recent border conflicts. Kate told them about the Battle of Proxima Station, where 300 human Marines had defended a mining colony against 5,000 pirate raiders. The pirates had better weapons and more ships, but the humans had better training and more determination. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the pirate fleet and 0 human casualties. War Commander Thicksnall asked how such a thing was possible. Kate explained that humans had learned to fight as a unified species instead of as competing tribes. When humans were threatened, they put aside their differences and worked together with a level of coordination that other species found difficult to achieve. This unity made them much more dangerous than their individual capabilities suggested. The Zephyrians finished their tea and sat quietly while they processed everything Kate had told them. She could see them reaching the same conclusion, that dozens of other aggressive species had reached before them. Fighting humans was a mistake that could destroy entire civilizations. Making friends with humans was a much better strategy for long-term survival. Kate pulled out a datapad and began typing up a new treaty proposal. The original meeting had been scheduled to discuss Zephyrian demands for human territory. Now she was writing an agreement for mutual cooperation and defense. The Zephyrians would withdraw their territorial claims, and in exchange, humans would provide technical assistance for Zephyrian colonies that were struggling with hostile environments. War Commander Thicksnall read the proposal carefully and discussed it with his warriors in their own language. Kate could tell from their body language that they were relieved to have found a way out of the conflict they had started. Fighting humans would have been expensive and dangerous even if they had won. Working with humans would be profitable and safe for everyone involved. The war commander signed the treaty using all 4 of his hands to show that the agreement was binding under Zephyrian law. Kate signed it as well using the authority that Earth had given her to negotiate on behalf of all human colonies. The meeting that had started with threats of war ended with promises of friendship and cooperation. Kate cleaned up the tea service and packed it carefully in her diplomatic bag. Most of the original set was broken, but she had managed to save enough pieces to make tea for herself. The backup set could be used for future meetings with other species who might need to learn the same lessons about human capabilities and human intentions. As the Zephyrians prepared to leave war, Commander Thicksnall asked Kate one final question. He wanted to know if humans would really help Zephyrian colonies that were struggling with dangerous environments. Kate assured him that humans were always willing to share survival knowledge with other species because survival was something that everyone deserved, regardless of their species or their past mistakes. The war commander thanked Kate for the tea and the education. He told her that his species had learned valuable lessons about both human strength and human mercy. The Zephyrians would spread word throughout the galaxy that humans were allies worth having and enemies worth avoiding. This was exactly the message that Kate had hoped to send. After the Zephyrians left, Kate sat alone in the conference room and made herself one final cup of tea. She looked out the big windows at the stars spinning slowly past and thought about her grandmother who had taught her to make perfect tea under impossible conditions. Her grandmother would have been proud to know that her lessons about staying calm and civilized had prevented a war. Kate finished her tea and began writing her report for Earth Command. She described the meeting as a successful diplomatic exchange that had resulted in a new alliance with the Zephyrian Empire. She mentioned that there had been a brief cultural misunderstanding that was resolved through demonstration of human adaptability. She did not mention that she had disarmed 12 alien warriors without spilling her tea, because some things were better left as classified information. The report would be read by other diplomats who would understand what had really happened, even though Kate had written it in careful diplomatic language. They would know that another aggressive species had learned to respect human capabilities and had chosen cooperation over conflict. This was how peace was built, one meeting and one cup of tea at a time.